So, can you talk about the history, talk about your history with Godzilla and why you wanted to make this film?
Yeah, I mean, I like. Sorry, Chris. Sorry, in the last interview, you know the paper. I get really easily distracted. Sorry. I don't know. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah. What was the question again?
The question is, talk about your history with Godzilla and why you wanted to make this film.
Yeah, I mean, my first exposure to Godzilla was growing up in the UK. Is like the cartoons they do. This the original Hanna-Barbera cartoon. They have this, they have Godzilla, but they also have this little character called Godzuki. It's kind of like this silly thing that, and as you grow up, that's kind of your first impression of Godzilla. That's what you think he's about. And then as I became a teenager, they started showing on Channel 4 these creature features every Friday night. Things like Destroy All Monsters and a lot of things from the 60s and 70s. And I loved all that stuff because I just a sucker for anything from that era that's science fiction or fantasy. And then as an adult, BFI re-released the original 1954 Godzilla, which was a surprise when I saw it because it's actually a very serious movie. It's you learn afterwards that it's actually a metaphor for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and if the Japanese could have made a film about Hiroshima, I think they would have, but at the time the censorship from the West was very strong after World War II, and so they had to disguise it as this monster movie where their city got destroyed and left radiation because of Godzilla, and I think because it was born out of something very personal and meaningful to Japan, it's what gave it the weight, I think, that has carried it for so long over the years, I think.
What was the story that you wanted to retell with Godzilla?
I mean, that's the thing, is one of the most attractive things about Godzilla is that it's kind of an infinite canvas. As long as you have Godzilla in the film, then it's a Godzilla movie. And so in terms of characters, it's not like a superhero film where it's always the same character and they always have the same dilemma. It can kind of be anything. And so early on, it was like, okay, which way are we going to go with this? What are we going to do? And for me, it was important that whoever we pick as our central character, that it's realistic that they would have an interaction with Godzilla in some way, that their normal journey would intersect without it feeling forced. And the obvious choice there was a military person, because obviously there's going to be some sort of military response. And so Aaron, who's the star of the film, he plays an EOD officer who does bomb disposal, and he has just come back from a tour of duty and back to his family for the first time in 14 months, and then suddenly something from his past reoccurs, and he gets sucked into this situation.
Why do you think the character of Godzilla has endured for so long?
I think there's lots of different reasons. I think there's a very primal thing that's going on with Godzilla in that we, for a long time, lived as part of nature. We evolved, with the animals, and there was always a threat that an animal was going to come and destroy our cave or kill our family. And it's only in recent generations that we've lived in cities. And yet that fear, I think, is very primal. That's sort of hardwired in our DNA. And so it shouldn't work. It shouldn't make sense that you can have a film like Godzilla and people respond to it. But I think it's because it's tapping into that inbuilt nightmare that we have that any day now the animal's going to come and he's going to kill our family or destroy our homes. And our homes are now 300 feet high, so the animal in our nightmares becomes 300 feet high, I think.
Can you talk a little bit about the cast and assembling the cast and how they contributed to the characters in this film?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you write the film and you kind of can't help. You try not to because you know you can end up disappointed, but you can't help but picture certain actors as you go along, and people like Bryan Cranston kept coming to mind for Joe, Aaron's father in the film, and you slowly build up this wish list along with the casting director, and we went to all our top actors and contacted them and said, would you like to be in Godzilla? And the natural response, which was kind of reassuring, was I'm not sure about that. And you go, okay, I know what you're picturing. I know the film you're picturing, and we're not making that movie. We're doing a serious, hopefully emotional, character-driven, version of Godzilla. And carefully, like, you'd send them like the screenplay and these. I did this sort of test animation, kind of short clip from the film, and you have conversations with them, and they all agreed. I mean, everybody at the top of the list signed up, thank God. So I was very lucky. I never thought I'd get to work, like, throughout my career, even whatever happened, I thought I'd never work with Juliette Binoche and Bryan Cranston, people like that, and got to do it on the first studio film. It was fantastic.
Pretty amazing. It was a good cast. Now, what was it like for you to go from independent, small budget filmmaking to this massive budget and cast and crew on this film?
It was a big step, but it wasn't as big a difference as I thought, because what you're mainly doing every day is you talk to 5 people. You're sort of surrounded in like this, you're protected in this little bubble from all the crew and all the extras and stuff. You only really interact with like the cameraman and the actors and people like that. And so that was very similar. The other thing that was similar is you're closing your eyes, you're picturing shots, and then you're going up to people and asking them to try and get that, or you're holding, in the low budget when I was holding the camera myself. But that's very similar too. And to be honest, even like the hardest task of all, which is the same no matter what budget level you're working on, is you've got to sit down for 2 hours and watch this film and be hooked. And that's kind of what everything is about. Everything's trying to support that 2-hour experience at the end of it that the audience is going to have. And storytelling, visual, composition, performance, these are all things that are kind of nothing to do with budget, nothing to do with, they're purely like, what from the imagination. And so they're things, thank God, that money can't solve those problems. And it's just a matter of like, you spend 2 years trying to make the best thing you possibly can, and then you cross your fingers and you hope people like it.
Speaking of the audience, what do you think what is it about this movie that's going to separate it from the other Godzilla films, and what do you think people will be reacting to in this film?
I think that probably the biggest difference, with our film, there's probably 2 things that I hope people react well to, is that, like, firstly, there's a lot of suspense in the film. It's not just monster mayhem all the time. There's like my favourite movies like Jaws and Alien and Jurassic Park and whatever. They all spent the first half of the film like giving you glimpses and hints and building up the aura around the creature, so that when you finally get the reveal and you get these moments, they're really powerful. And so I was trying to emulate that kind of filmmaking. And also, the other word that we used a lot on set was emotion, and like trying to care about what was happening and genuinely care about the characters. And we spent a lot of time trying to create a family that gets broken apart by the events in our movie, so that you're really rooting for them to get back together, and throw some surprises along the way, so people feel like, oh, I'm not really sure how this is going to end.